Rocho sambo pa gyo trashi pa tuche tembe chinle yarmonda pege drolo zambe zebrache palde lame shabla solvade Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Karma Utta Vardanya Shri Bar Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Karma Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Karma Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Ma Pakyuke Tudan Dagi Tenyerme Chindu Jingilo Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lo Makyuke Sundan Dagi Makyuke Tudan Dagi Tenyerme Chindu Jingilo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Kyamuni Soham Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha Om Muni Muni Hamuni Shakyamuni Soha Sashi Pegi Chushi Medo Rirav Lingshe Nide Gembadi Sangye Shindu Migde Uwargi Drogu Namda Shingla Chuparashu Yedam Guru Radna Mandrala Kamniryatayami Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Penchira Sangye Druparashu Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparashu Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chishe Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparashu In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge and enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Some years ago, when I started to study a little bit more and I started to listen more about Buddha's teachings, let's say some 20 years ago, something like that. Okay? emptiness always seemed something quite far away and complicated. Basically, I think because of the lack of familiarity in one way, and secondly, by the way how it was also often explained, that something so far away and difficult. Actually, what I really believe is that it's actually much more simple than very often it seems. But it is explained in a more complicated way somehow, which at least for us looks more complicated, because it's going into very many details. Why do we need so many details to talk about emptiness when actually emptiness by itself is so simple? In other words, why do we need to go into so many details to talk about the correct view of reality when actually it is so simple? Basically, because the wrong view of reality is more complicated. Okay? Basically, because our ignorance has many faces and many aspects. Okay? So, if we really look, all the most, let's say, complicated, let's call like that, complicated explanations about the correct view of reality, they are not really about the correct view of reality in one way. Yes, but they are most of all done in that way. Why? Because our wrong view of reality is very complicated. So it's like if we have many doors open and we need to close each one of them first. Okay? And that's why it takes time. That's why it is more complicated and so on. Because we have many ways how our mind, it's a little bit like a water leak, our ignorance. We close from one place, water always finds a place where to go from another, You need really to seal it perfectly, otherwise water will always find a way how to go in. So what happens is that's why if we look the great masters, starting from Buddha himself, they gave many explanations about emptiness that sometimes are quite long and extend and vast, and sometimes even it gets a bit complicated. And I believe it's like that, basically because they are closing all the little leaks wherever is possible for our ignorance to go through. So, sometimes we concentrate ourselves only on the correct view of reality, which is also good, but we forget to look at our own ignorance. And the first thing that we need to do, we need to close the doors for our ignorance in order for wisdom to be able to get space to rise. Okay? So, for me personally, some years ago, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, I have a very bad memory for time. So for me, 2 years or 15 years, it doesn't make much difference. It's like that. I'm like this. So, some years ago, which can mean a lot or less, I don't know. Anyhow, I had this experience, which it was in the moment that I heard this verse from the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, and it made a big difference in my mind. The verse that I was saying, I think, the day before yesterday, without entering in contact with the designated object, it's not possible to apprehend its known existence. Okay? Without entering in contact with the designated object, it's not possible to apprehend its known existence. Which means that first we need to realize what is the object of negation in order to understand the negation. In other words, first we need to see how ignorance sees reality in order to see that it's wrong. So it's like looking at our own face, looking at our own eyes, seeing how do I see things in a wrong way. It's only in the moment that I can understand how I see things wrong that I can say that it is wrong. Okay? And here is a big debate which comes out, which says, okay, but in the moment that I see that my view is wrong, I have already realized that it is wrong. And then here Geshe Eshe Wanchuk, one of Rinpoche's gurus, my guru also, very special master. He was one of the greatest scholars of this last century. And in one of his books, he says, it's similar to the fact when you need to catch a thief. Saying that you know the thief, knowing the person necessarily doesn't mean you know the thief. Let's say that Devadatta has stolen. Okay? The fact that I know Devadatta doesn't mean that I know the thief. Right? I can know Devadatta very well, and Devadatta was the one that was stealing. But this doesn't mean that I know the thief. I need to be aware that here, this is Devadatta, I know him, and at the same time, I know that he has been stealing. But it's not because I know Devadatta and I know that he was stealing that I already catched Devadatta. I still need to go and catch him. Because sometimes what happened, and I just heard one case of this short ago, is that I know that Devadatta is stealing, but I cannot catch him right away because I don't know how my business go on without him. So I have a business. I know that the business is not giving much profit or not profit at all. Or maybe sometimes little profit, sometimes it's making some debts and so on. And when I go to look out of it, why? It's because there is someone stealing. And I find out that who is stealing is Devadatta. But I don't know how to run the business without Devadatta. So I keep him there for the moment. Okay? It's like in the beginning, we need to see ignorance. Ignorance, we already know ignorance very well. It's since long time. But we need to see ignorance as ignorance. We need to see the way how we see reality, how we grasp at inherent existence as ignorance. But then still we are not able to eliminate it right away because we don't know how to exist without it. We don't know how to function without it. Okay? And many doubts may come to us. Okay? It's the same thing with selfishness. Once we understand that selfishness is the main cause of our suffering, okay, I got the point, but how can I live without it? Okay? We start to have fear about it. It's like in the text and the discussion between wisdom and ignorance, the Daksin Shakti poet, Panchen Losang Chögyaltsen wrote, and he says, there's a moment in which ignorance, which in this case is selfishness, is telling to wisdom. You know, there's the person in the middle and the two discussing, and it's saying, you want me to go away? But how are you going to live without me? How are you going to get food? How are you going to get to survive without me? Without anyone thinking for you, thinking about you. Who is going to take care of you if not me? Okay? These are doubts that we get. Okay? So the point is that, yes, I understand that selfishness is generating suffering, but how can I live without it? I understand that to grasp at inherent existence is the main source of the root of all my suffering. But how can I live without it? Without it, I think the world would not exist. I don't know how to relate with everything else. Okay? It's also called the fear of emptiness. So we need gradually to eliminate the fear of emptiness. Okay? So, that's why there is a long process of many teachings also in order to slowly eliminate these doubts, slowly make us to see more clear our own ignorance and to understand better wisdom. Okay? That's why there are many, many steps on this whole path. Because technically, emptiness is very simple. What is difficult is to eliminate ignorance. Because ignorance is very subtle. It enters through many different ways. It appears in many different ways. That's why we need slowly to close all these doors. Okay? Well. So, when we talk about this fear of emptiness, the realizations of emptiness are also measured in the amount of fear we have of emptiness. The fear comes from the fact of not being able to see reality outside of the paradigm of inherent existence. And there was one story of Geshe Sengye, which we have depicted there, looking to Atisha on the left side. And he was one of the main disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, and one of the main holders of the lineage of Tantra. He was the founder of the monastery of Sergyu, and where the lineage of the whispered lineage of Ganden was, maintained and transmitted. And he was one of the important disciples. And one day during one teaching, this is in his biography, I think, of Lama Tsongkhapa, one day during one teaching about the lack of inherent existence of the self, Geshe Sengye, at a certain point, he starts to put his hand on his clothes, on the tunga, this part of the cloth. And he was doing like this, and he was grasping and trying to hold himself to say, I do exist. That was his attitude. No, I am here. Where am I, And he was like touching himself. And then Lama Tsongkhapa looked at him and started a little bit laughing and saying, oh, look at that. Geshe Sengye is afraid of not existing. Because when he started to see clearly that he didn't exist inherently, he couldn't at the same time find a mode of existence outside of the inherent existence. It's not intellectual, it's something much deeper. So he got afraid of not existing. And that's part of the path. Because when we start to really bring it deep that we do not exist in the way how we see our existence, right away we are not able to experience a different mode of existence, It's like, if I do not exist inherently, how can I ever exist? And then we get afraid of that. And that's why it takes time. That's why there are many aspects on the teachings in order for us to eliminate gradually this fear and to be able to put the two things together, that I do not exist inherently, but I exist interdependently. Okay? To put the two things together is not so obvious. Intellectually, we may get there without so much difficulty, but deep within, it's not that obvious. Okay? So, what happens is that's why it also takes time, because technically the explanation about emptiness itself, it's quite simple. What is more complicated is eliminating ignorance that has so many different aspects. Okay? So today, we go now to our verse of today. And we are on verse number 40. And verse number 40 is related to another doubt that may come. Because there are some philosophical schools. Actually, this is from verse number 40 up to verse number 56, 55. The point is that there are some schools within Buddhism, especially which we call the Vaibhasika school and the Sautantrika school, which are also mostly known nowadays as the Hinayana schools. Okay, sometimes they are called the Theravada, but it's not from my point of view, it's not the right way of saying, because Theravada is one of the 18 schools within the Vaibhasika school. Okay, Vaibhasika has 18 schools, and the Theravada is one of them. It's called the school of the elderly. So that's why nowadays the one most commonly existing today, the Theravada. That's why normally it's called Theravada, but it's not the only one. Okay, originally. Anyhow, some of these schools, they see the Mahayana sutras as wrong sutras, as if Buddha have never taught them. They see that, only the Theravada teachings, only the Hinayana teachings are true, all the Mahayana teachings do not exist, these are all inventions that were made later, and Buddha have never taught something like that. And and they also don't talk about emptiness. Okay? So this verse, the next verses are actually to answer them. Okay? But before going through the verses, I just remember something that was quite interesting. Some years ago, not so many years ago, I was in Thailand, and there was one congress organized by Dhammakaya Foundation with two scholars, which actually, one of them, I think they were both archaeologists also, and they were talking about the research that they were doing in the area of Bamyan in Afghanistan and in Pakistan and so on. And they were talking about the most ancient Buddhist texts that were found until now. Okay? That in this area they found scripts, books, that were the oldest one, I think more than 2,000 years old. So I don't remember now exactly how old they were. Okay? But these were the oldest texts of the Tripitaka, okay, of the teachings of Buddha. They were the oldest version that they found. And the interesting thing is that what they were saying, first of all, the language in which they were written was not Pali, but was another language, I don't remember now exactly the name, which is a mixture of Pali and Sanskrit. Okay? And the second very interesting thing is that the oldest texts that were ever found until now, they were actually Mahayana texts. So there was I, in the middle of this congress, with at least maybe 300 Theravada monks around me. I was the only Mahayana monk there. And then there was this scholar saying that the oldest texts which were found until now, they are actually of texts that are only inside the Mahayana Tripitaka, you know. And they were explaining it technically, why and how, and in this very, how do you say, technical and very academical way, you know. And it was very interesting in a way to see that. So this is a way of also, for our modern mind, it's a way of a proof that the Mahayana texts are original texts and are not something that were just invented later. Okay? Anyhow, now the next verses are actually to answer back these different points of view. Okay? Which is in a way to eliminate doubts that we may have. So let's first read the Tibetan. Tarpa töber döbe kyang tongni togoba druba tsöbas. Dempa tongwe cholgyurgi. Tongni tongwe chishik chan. Len. Tongni tobe sherab teni. Sibale trowe lamdu drubas. Tekpa chenbo döde. Kalungi drube gone drubas. Kanchir lungle lamdini. Mebar chanchu mebar song. Kanchir lungle lamdini. Mebar chanchu mebar son rikpe druba, godzungi drubas. Kalte tekche madrum na kyogi lungni jidar drub. Kangchir niga la di drub, tangbo kyo la dima drub. Kien kangini ter yiche, dini tekche layang sung. Sheni döbe denani, rikche sokyan tempar gyur. Tekchen tsoche chirshena, lung la mute pache dans, lung shen laya ranshen da, tsoche yinchir torchar gyur. Nalme rikpe drubas. Tensa gelo niyena, gelo nikan kawarne, semni mikdan chenamki, nyange deban kawarne. Toni tobe sherabdan chalnas, rachomba da nyande tobar misibar temba. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit more fast through these verses as they are not so difficult to understand. Okay. And we can go to the meaning without so much difficulty. As it says, verse number 40. Suppose, like the Hinayanists, you then objected. But since liberation comes from seeing the truths, which is the Four Noble Truths, what's the use of seeing voidness? The question made is like, but since liberation from samsara comes from realizing the Four Noble Truths, what's the use of realizing emptiness, What's the point of that if we don't need it to get out of samsara? Well, why you say so? Because from scriptural authority it's being proclaimed that without this path there is no purified state. Then this is the answer thing. Why you say so? Because on the sutras of Buddha, it's said that without the path of realizing emptiness, there is no state of nirvana, there is no purified state, there is no getting out of suffering and samsara. Suppose you then objected, but Mahayanas not established as valid. The Mahayana sutras are not established as valid. The Mahayana teachings are not real valid. This is just something that was invented later. Well, how can your scriptures be established then? If Mahayana teachings are not valid, why the Hinayana teachings are valid then? No? What do you have that I don't have, basically? No? If you answered, because they are established for both parties. What do we mean by that now? Let's check. Well, they weren't established for you from the start. Any criterion that would give confidence in them would equally apply to the Mahayana ones too. And if acceptance by two different parties could make something true, then the Vedas and so on would also become true. Suppose you argued, it's because the Mahayana ones are disputed. Well, because your scripture are disputed by non-Buddhists and some other sections within your scriptures by yourself and others, they have to be discarded too. Okay. Suppose you say, but the teachings, okay, this is already, we go right to the next part. So, as we can see, these texts are not so much difficult. Let me just try to get to the commentary to see exactly what do we mean by these two parties. Kalte tekche madruma kyogi lungni jitar drup kangchir niga la di drup. Yeah, it's just saying two. It's need to go to the commentary just to be sure what it means. Niente de bagaginare demba shi namba mi toba so chudungo son to toba gombe cholwara dra chumbe dribu tobar gyurgis cho tamche dembe tomba ni tongwe chishi cha goba meching mirikso shenas niente de bakache sange tobar cheba la yang tongni topa mi gobar mase cho gi dame gi min sayang ke mi lenchins tekpa chimbo dode kar ke mi lemba de da chonge sobo yinlas sharla tekpa chimbo dode semara shekyang dra chumbe drebu tobar choki dame tobe mi gobar sheba tekyang kane toni tobe sherab ni seba le trove lam tu druba shebe shungdi la goba yinos niba len la sums toni tobe sherab tambos Nirandra chumbe trebu toba la toni toba ngebar goba ta gyunze kange chirna shiragi paro tu chimbe dode lungi toni tobe la lamdi goemba chuchu trejenge yomla dusumge gone sheyan docho ne nyerange tekpa chimbo lonchen just getting to the point 1 second kalte tekpa chimbo de ngela karma drupchen semar kemi lembe ngela ma drumna te drupche tu kone toni tope nyeram gi yang lam tu druba ni drupcha dan tsungso shenas kyoge long kyoge semar dobe tengmengi deno dinam ka yimbar jitar drup tribe dida ka intes kange chirnas nao puja nigala tekpa membe dode nigar drubar chenas gyumzen kungi tsunde kyogi kema takpodan lungron ten kyogi kema takpela lungdan rikpe ten la bebe tambo kyola yang membe deno de la tsemar drublas pyudere lung tsemar kelembe kingi tab takt kangi dulwan nans dode lungi ngombara tedama imbe kansa shin kanya rungwa ni debe semar dena ni rikche gishun ngosum gichuni gawra jogo teba chembo tekpa chembo temba so lungde rikbe tenla bebe tab kangi ni lung semar ter yeche ge drube drupche tenis tekchengi dode layan tsumbar sung sos I find everything, but I cannot get it too. Kansanyigi tsemar döbe yobe chiros. It's basically, from what it seems, it's then when we say here, when it says, where were we? Because they were established for both parties. It's saying because both sides were correct. The one that was teaching was valid and the one that is listening was valid. That's why the teachings are valid, basically. Okay? So then, here comes the discussion. It's saying, okay, if you say that this is what makes your Hinayana teachings valid, why my Mahayana teachings cannot be valid? And if it's based on your own personal judgment, then all the other teachings are also valid because each one have their own judgment on that. Okay? So you cannot, based on that, say that the Mahayana teachings are not valid. So the point here, basically, is that these schools, they say that because Buddha didn't teach about emptiness to them, basically because they were not ready. There was the danger on these people that if Buddha would have told them, oh look, all phenomena lack inherent existence, they would go into nihilistic view and think that nothing actually does exist. So in order for that not to happen, Buddha didn't talk at all about emptiness. So then after, you get some other teaching, and instead, Buddha said that things actually do exist. No? So in one way, in one teaching, Buddha say phenomena do exist. In other teachings, Buddha say phenomena do not exist. Some confusion comes out, no? So what happened is that the disciples that first Buddha said phenomena do exist, when they look at the teachings where Buddha saying things do not exist, they say, oh, that's wrong. Buddha didn't say that. That's how this confusion is coming out. So here it's giving the answer saying, no, actually, the teachings are valid, first of all. There is no reason why the Mahayana teachings shouldn't be valid. Give me a valid reason for that. And the reason that we're given until now is not simply because you do not accept it. It's not a valid reason in this sense. And then the next part is coming after talking about the actual reason why we need to realize emptiness. No? Because there are two answers here. The first answer is based on the scriptures. So as it says, because from the scriptural authority it's been proclaimed that without the path of emptiness, of the correct view of reality, there is no nirvana, there is no purified state. Suppose you then objected by saying, but the Mahayana is not established, but the Mahayana's teachings are not correct, are not true. Then, what happens is I will say, then why that? Then why are the Hinayana teachings correct and not the Mahayana? So then goes into this type of discussion, which is a bit quite complicated. And also here, just to make one point clear, when it says, any criterion that would give confidence in them would equally apply to the Mahayana ones too. And if acceptance by two different parties could make something true, then the Vedas and so on would also become true. Here, when we talk about true, it's not meaning the fact of something being not existence or something like non-existent or something like that. It means something on which we can truly trust on every word that is being said there. Okay? And what happened is that the Vedas, just to make things clear, have many truths inside the Vedas. It's not saying that the Vedas are all completely wrong. Not at all. Okay? There are many very special things inside the Vedas. But according to Buddhist teachings, there are aspects inside the Vedas which are not correct. Okay? In relation especially to the correct view of reality and other aspects. So based on that is what is being said here. It's not a matter of saying, oh, now everything else is wrong, only Buddha's teachings are perfect and all the rest is completely wrong. It's not that being said, okay? Just to make it clear here, because otherwise we can go into that type of view. Okay, but here just to make, I'm going to continue just after this. This first part is quite simple, no? But it's the point that there are some schools that say, oh, you don't need emptiness just to get out of samsara. All you need to do is eliminate your ignorance and you don't need to realize emptiness for that. Okay? So, this is the first part of the answer, which is saying no, because in Buddha's teachings it's said that you need to eliminate, that you need to develop the correct view of reality by realizing emptiness. And they're saying no, but these teachings are not right. So this is the first part of discussion. Okay? So, in the Italian translation, which is a little bit mixed with a commentary, it's putting more clear what it means by both parties. Both parties, in according to this commentary, is the Hinayanas and Mahayanas. So they're saying, oh, the Hinayanas' teachings are true because both the Hinayanas and the Mahayanas accept them as true. And what does that mean? Just because two parties accept them as truth, it doesn't mean that necessarily that's going to be true. No? So basically what is being said is that the reasons that you give saying that the Mahayana teachings are not true is it's a dogma. It's just because you believe so. There is not a valid reason out of that. So first you give me a valid reason, then we can really discuss deeply about it. But for now there is no valid reasoning on that. Okay? Well, then let's go move on a little bit. And then there is the other part also which we have seen, verse 43, which says, suppose you argued, it's because the Mahayana ones are disputed. There is discussions to say if they are right or wrong, there are disputes. So that's why we say that they are not true. Well, because your scriptures are disputed by non-Buddhists, and some other sections within your scriptures by yourselves and others, they have to be discarded too. So if the reason that something is being disputed means that it's not valid, then what happens? Also your teachings are being disputed by someone else. So then why can you say it's valid? Okay? So this is still not a valid reason why to say that these teachings are not actually valid. Okay? Tensa gelo ni yena, gelo ni kyang kawar ne. Toni tope sherab dan chalnas, drachumpa dan yande toba misibar tembas. The next part, from verse 44 onwards, it's showing that without emptiness it's not possible to reach the arhat route, to reach the state of an arhat. Toni tope sherab dan chalnas, drachumpa dan yande toba misibar tembas. Tensa gelo ni yina, gelo ni kyang kawar ne. Sem ni mik dan chenamgi, nyange deba kawar ne. Mitaba sochudrugi lam tsamgi dra chomba tomnas, nyomo ngungur pangba tsamgi kyang tobar talwas. Nyomo pambe cholnate, tema taktu ter chol gyurus. Nyomo me kyang tedala, legi nuba tongwa yins. Te lengakpa, reshi nyerlen seba ni, meche ngeba niche na, sete nyomong chen mingyang, kumu shintu chite me, tsorwe kengi seba yin, tsorwa teda la yang yu, mikpa dangni chebe sem, gashi lani nebar gyur. Tena, tarpa tsam döbe kyang, tongni gom gobar temba. Okay. Suppose you replied, but they have been liberated because they have rid themselves. Verse 44. Suppose you said, but the teachings of the Four Noble Truths are the roots of the absolute monkhood of arhats. Well, even absolute monkhood itself is on difficult grounds, since the nirvana of a mind still aimed at the impossible is on difficult grounds. Because you replied, suppose you replied, but they have become liberated because they have rid themselves of disturbing emotions. Well, that would need to have happened immediately upon that. However, it seemed that despite their lacking disturbing emotions, they are still under the power of karma. Suppose you then said, but it's definite that they don't have, still to some extent, craving as a condition for obtaining rebirth. Well, why couldn't it be that a craving that's not with disturbing emotions is still existing in them, while still with bewilderment about all? Through the circumstances of feeling, there is craving, and feeling still exists in them as well. So a mind still having an aim will come to be settled on one or another. A mind that is parted from voidness may block it, but it will arise once again. A mind that is parted from voidness may block it, but it will arise once again, as with a trance that lacks distinguishing. Therefore, one needs to meditate on voidness. Okay? So what's the point here? These schools are saying, actually, you don't need emptiness to be free from samsara. For example, the arhats, which here it's being used the name of the absolute monkhood, which would be basically is another way of talking about getting out of samsara, reaching the state of an arhat. So he's saying, but an arhat, he can reach the state of an arhat without actually needing emptiness, just by meditating on the Four Noble Truths and the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. By realizing that, he's able actually to get out of samsara. And because by that, he's able to subdue his mental defilements. And without having no more mental defilements, automatically you are out of samsara. The point from the Mahayana point of view is that that's not enough. Because what happens is that by meditating and realizing the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, which is something very important and wonderful, but it's possible only to eliminate the mental defilements from a gross point of view, which is said in Tibetan, Nyomongungurwa, which is the manifested point of view. It's not eliminating the mental defilements from an unmanifested, spontaneous way. The only way to eliminate our mental defilements from an unmanifested, spontaneous way is by the realization of emptiness. Okay? Just to explain this a little bit better, is the example that we gave yesterday. I can, by meditating on impermanence and many other methods, I can eliminate my anger. Okay? But if I still see something as an object of anger, even though I do not react with anger, the bases are still going to be there. Okay? So, the only way to eliminate the root of anger, jealousy, and so on, attachment and so on, is actually by realizing the lack of inherent existence, is by realizing emptiness. So the point here is that saying, even though he eliminates his mental defilements only in one, we call Ngungurwa, which only in the manifested level, that's not enough, because as soon as there will be conditions, the mental defilements will arise once again. They will remanifest once again as soon as conditions will appear again. No? As it is said here. Okay? Because they are still under the power of karma. They are still under the law of karma. They still need to live the experience of their past deeds. So conditions will rise again. And once conditions rise, the mental defilements will appear. So as it says, but it's definite that they don't have, still to some extent, craving as a condition for obtaining rebirth. They have no more attachment. They have no more craving. But why couldn't it be that a craving that's not with disturbing emotions is still existing in them, while still with bewilderment about all? Through the circumstance of feeling there is craving. Wherever there is sensation, there will be attachment, desire, craving. Craving means the wish not to suffer and to be happy. It's the craving for happiness and the craving to be free from suffering. And in the moment there is sensation, naturally there will be craving. And they still have sensation, so naturally that will happen. Even though mental defilements are not anymore manifested. Okay? So the point here is saying that it's wonderful to block, as in verse 48 it's very clear, it says, a mind that is parted from voidness, a mind that is without the realization of emptiness, may block the mental defilements, may block it. But it will arise once again. What? The mental defilements. As with a trance that lacks distinguishing. Therefore, one needs to meditate on voidness. Which means basically that if we do not eliminate our mental defilements from its non-manifested, subtle, spontaneous way, they will rise once again. And the only way to change our mind from a spontaneous deep is changing our mode of apprehension of phenomena. Because that's the actual root of all other mental defilements. Okay? So this is just answering this other aspect of the Theravada, or not exactly of, not to say Theravada, sorry, of the Vaibhasika and the Sautantrika school, which they say, to get out of samsara, you don't need to realize emptiness. All you need is actually to eliminate your mental defilements by meditating on emptiness and so on, on impermanence and so on. Okay, which are the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, which are wonderful and necessary to meditate on them, also according to Mahayana. But it's not enough to get out of samsara. You must meditate on the lack of inherent existence. Otherwise, you will only be able to eliminate the mental defilements on a more gross level. Which means that, as we saw the day before yesterday, why do we suffer? Because we have mental delusions. Because we have anger, attachment, fear, and so on. Okay? Why do we have these disturbing emotions? Because we are selfish. Why are we selfish? Because we are ignorant. So the point is that even though I am able to tame my selfishness, even though I'm able to tame my anger and attachment and fear and so on, if I do not eliminate the roots of ignorance, as soon as there may be conditions, they may rise again. Okay? That's why we need to realize emptiness in order to get out of the cycle of samsara. There is no other way other than that. Okay? Well. Minebe nyangde le debe lam tu druba. Tongni danyi talwe sem gakpa laryang ke gyurte dushe mebe nyumju shing tene tongni gombarcha ngakdam dode la jukte kalte sange sungdo na tekchen palcher kechagi dodan tsungdo minamchi kalte matok chigini tamche kyondan che gyurna dötsun chigi tamche ni gyalwe sungba chi mayin nga kang we sung chenpo la sokpe tingpo ma gyurpa teni kyogi ma tokpe sungja minpara sushik che. Mompe dunga minebe nyangdele debe lamtu druba. Mompe dunga chen tuen tu chakdan jikta le cholwa korwar neba drub gyurwa teni tongni drebu yin. Tena cholwar teni ki tongni gombe rikpa damba. Detar tongba ni chola sunjin pa ni tema ins. Tena tezom misewar tongba ni gombarcha. Nyomo sheje dribai mumbe nyembo tongba ni nyurtu tamche kendobe tini jitar gomi che. Ngoyo kang dunga keche pa tela chakpa kegyurna tongni dunga shiche pa tela jikpa jitar ke. Kalte daga yönani chiyang rungla jigyurna dani gaya yöminpe jikpar gyurwa sushik yin. Okay, verse 49. So again, if you accept it as spoken by the Buddha, any speech that is made it down into the sutras, then they do not accept them. Then why not to accept the Mahayana, which for the most part are equivalent to your sutras? If because of one exception all would be corrupt, then why, because of one equivalence to your sutras, wouldn't all have been spoken by the Buddha? And who would consider unacceptable some speech, the depth of which even Mahakasyapa and the like couldn't fathom, simply because you can't understand it? After all, the fruit of realizing voidness is this: through freedom from the extremes of attachment and fear, being able to stay in samsara for the sake of those suffering from being bewildered. As it's like this, the reasons improper in the direction of voidness, therefore, without indecisively, therefore, without indecisively wavering, meditate, please, on voidness. Voidness is the opponent for the darkness of the emotional and cognitive obstructions. So, how can someone wishing for omniscience quickly not meditate on it? Cognizing phenomena as truly existence give rise to suffering, generate fear for death, but realizing voidness pacifies suffering. So why does not fear generate for death? Go ahead and be afraid of whatever, if there were something called a me. Okay, this we're already going to the next part. So, again, it's referring to the fact that they do not accept the Mahayana Sutras. So it's saying, why you don't accept the Mahayana Sutras? Simply because you don't find equivalent teachings in the Hinayana Sutras. So wouldn't it be enough then for you to accept the Mahayana Sutras because there are equivalent parts in the Hinayana Sutras? No? If you find it this way. Or you say you cannot understand that simply because some great masters of the Hinayana tradition couldn't understand the Mahayana Sutras? If this is the reason, I'm sorry if you don't understand, that's your problem, but that's not a reason why it shouldn't be valid. No? As it's saying here, and who would consider unacceptable some speech, the depths of which even the Mahakasyapa and the like couldn't fathom, simply because you can't understand it. It's not simply because you cannot understand it that you say to me that it's not valid. That's not fine. And then here there is, after all, the conclusion saying why actually we really need to go to understand emptiness. After all, the fruits of realizing emptiness is, what are the results of realizing emptiness? through the freedom from the extremes of attachment and fear, being able to stay in samsara for the sake of those suffering from being bewildered. By realizing emptiness, we are able to stay in samsara without attachment to, here it says, without attachment or fear. Here it means without attachment to nirvana and fear of samsara. Okay? So, dedar tomba ni chola sunjin pani temains, tena tezo misawar mombadunga chendo pe chakdan jikpa tale chols. Yeah, it's going away of the two extremes, which is the extreme of attachment to nirvana and fear of samsara. So by realizing emptiness, we go beyond these two extremes. And by that way, we are able to stay in samsara, which means being out of samsara, still live with all sentient beings and help them. Okay? So here when it says here actually, being able to stay in samsara is actually not literally to be still in samsara, because once you realize emptiness, you are out of samsara, but still you live together with all other sentient beings, because in the Hinayana way of thinking, here it says, when you get out of samsara, you get to a different level of existence. You are not anymore experiencing reality together with other sentient beings. Okay? So he says, by realizing emptiness, you get away of the extremes of attachment of nirvana and fear of samsara. And because of being free from attachment to nirvana and the fear of samsara, you are able to be together with other sentient beings, actually not being anymore part of samsara, but you are together with them to help them to be free from suffering. Okay? Which is something so wonderful, no? And it's like this. The reason, what's that mean in English? Huh? Okay. So, derisions is improper in the direction of voidness. Therefore, without indecisively wavering, meditate please on voidness. So it's wrong to criticize emptiness, because emptiness brings you something much greater, which is the ability to be free from samsara within samsara itself. Not to think that to go out of samsara is just to get somewhere else, because the idea is that what's the Hinayana Nirvana which is being taught here? It's actually quite nice. It's the idea that by eliminating the manifested mental defilements, we don't need any more suffering. So once we die from this gross body that is impure, we enter into a state of deep meditation, of no sensation, of no suffering or happiness, on a neutral state. And we can stay on that neutral state without a gross body for eons and eons to come. And we get attached to that state. This is the attachment to nirvana, which is this simple state of non-suffering state. But at the same time, we still have fear of samsara. Okay? In the sense that we don't want to be in samsara. Okay? So, by realizing emptiness, it gives us the possibility to go beyond that. Which means to still be in contact with the world and being helping sentient beings, but without actually being part of it. It's like I go to help those that are in jail, but I am not a prisoner. And I don't suffer for being there. Okay? So do not criticize emptiness when actually it gives you something that is so much important and precious. So, voidness, which means emptiness, realizing not emptiness of the realization of emptiness, no? Is the opponent for the darkness of the emotional and cognitive obstructions. Obscurations, sorry. Let me just see what's in Tibetan, how it's the meaning of that here. Yeah. Here, what is being translated in this case as cognitive and emotional obscurations is what normally is called the obscuration, or is normally called the obstruction of defilements and the obstruction of knowledge, which basically is what here is called emotional obscurations, means our mental defilements. And cognitive obscuration here, it's actually the imprints of our mental defilements. More specifically, the imprints of ignorance. So, it's called shetrip and nyuntrip. Nyuntrip means mental defilements. Shebedripa or shetrip means the obscuration or obstruction to omniscience or to knowledge, which are the imprints of ignorance. So the only way to eliminate both is by the realization of emptiness. Okay? So voidness is the opponent of the darkness, of the emotional and cognitive obscurations. So how can someone wishing for omniscience quickly not meditate on it? If you want so much to reach enlightenment, how can you not meditate on emptiness? If that's the real key to eliminate both obscurations, which is what keeps us away of realizing of enlightenment itself. Okay. Cognizing phenomena as truly existent gives rise to suffering. Generate fear for that, which doesn't mean that we need to live on fear, which means when it says here generate fear for that, it's generate this strong intention not to want any more ignorance. The ignorance that grasps at phenomena as being of inherent existence is what generates all suffering. So generate fear for that grasping at inherent existence. Understand that that's what's going to generate everything, so see that as the main cause for suffering. For example, if we talk about having a very bad sickness, let's say cancer, do we have fear of cancer or not? Which doesn't mean that we are experiencing fear at this moment. But if we talk about having cancer, do we have fear of it? Are we afraid of having cancer? Yes. Why? Because we don't want to suffer, right? So we are afraid of anything that generates suffering on us. That's why it's saying, be afraid of ignorance. Be afraid of grasping at inherent existence, because that's what's generating all your suffering. Nothing else. Okay? So, but realizing voidness pacifies suffering. So why does not fear generate for that? So why you do not generate, it says, Jikpar Gyurwa Sushik Yin. So why does fear generate for that? Why do we need to have fear of emptiness when actually it's going to eliminate all our suffering? So basically, what happens is that we are attached to the grasping of inherent existence and we have fear of emptiness. Why? Because we are conditioned since a long time to experience things in this way. But we need to exactly change our mode of apprehension of things and understand that the grasping at inherent existence, it's what actually is generating suffering to us, and that's why we must fear it. While emptiness is the solution for all our suffering, and that's why we should not fear it. Okay? So with this, we conclude actually the whole part of introduction on the 9th chapter, which is bringing now, okay, now you got the point why emptiness is so important or not? If yes, okay, now let's see how to realize emptiness. Okay? Because it's useless to talk about how to realize emptiness if we do not understand the importance of emptiness. Okay? So here it came to the point first saying, look, there is no way out of suffering if not realizing the lack of inherent existence, if not realizing emptiness, if not realizing the correct view of reality. There is no other way out. So let's do it. What are you wasting your time on? Trying to solve this problem here because this person said this, because that person said that, it's because I have pain here, and because there is this, that, and because this, Life goes on. And why are you losing this precious opportunity to go against the deepest enemy of yours, which is your own ignorance? Take opportunity on your hand. Meditate on emptiness. Understand it. Follow it. Even though maybe for now, we are not ready really to eliminate it right away because it takes time. But we put effort in it, Dedicate ourselves for it. See, for example, now, today is supposedly the last day of this year, right? I mean supposedly because a year is totally relative. Because someone chose that the calendar works like this, but our calendar is something that, we respect, but still, it's not like, if there are other systems of calendar which are more valid from my point of view because the calendar is nothing more, nothing less than a representation of the movement of the planets and so on, of the astral bodies. But our now is not that much, We say, why is the new year? Why tomorrow is the new year? Because it's the 1st of January. Yes or not? It's not that the point. Tomorrow it's supposed to be the new year because the earth has completed one circumambulation around the sun. But it's not. Because it's not precisely in this way. It's more or less, Because after some time, human beings have the tendency to simplify things because when they are complicated, we are not able, and not everyone is able to understand. So we simplify things. Well, supposedly today is the last day of the year. What happened is that we have this idea, what I'm going to do the next year, and we have all these things about what I'm going to do, and my life, what I am doing with my life, what's the objective, my job is not the way how I want it, my marriage is not yet there in the way how I want it, or I want to get married, I want this, I want that. We make so many programs for this life, which is okay. I'm not going to go into that level, But the main objective that we should have, the main project that we should put is, I must realize emptiness. Beyond everything else, if I get married or I don't get married, if I remain married or I don't remain married, if my job change or my job don't change, if I get fat or I get thin, if whatever, all this will just go by. The main objective, what is the main objective? I must realize emptiness. Whatever is the job that I get, whatever is my situation in relationships, whatever is the situation of my body, whatever is my economical situation, all of this is secondary in front of realizing emptiness. So what's my main objective? It's to eliminate the causes of my suffering. Because why do I want a good marriage? Because I want to be happy and I don't want to suffer. And I think that would help. Why do I want to... I'm talking generally, Why do I want a good job? Because I don't want to suffer, and I think that would help. Why do I want to get thinner? And why do I want to get a nice plastic surgery or whatever? Because I want to look beautiful, and I think that would help because I want to be happy, and I think this will help. So all these proposals, all these ideas we put for ourselves, why do we put all of that? Because we want to be happy. But as it says here, very clear, Shantideva is remembering us, and saying, verse 55, cognizing phenomena as truly existent gives rise to suffering, generate fear for that. But realizing voidness pacifies suffering. So why does fear generate for that? Why do we need to be afraid of our spiritual path? Why we don't put that as the main objective of our life? Because that's what is the real solution. All other things, marriage, work, body, you like to get a plastic surgery, do it, I don't care about it. As long as the priority is realizing emptiness and generating compassion. Is dealing with your own mental defilements. Bring that as your main priority. That's what Shantideva is bringing to us. If we really have it as our main priority, then we can go on from verse 56 on. Otherwise, what's the point of learning how to realize emptiness if we don't want to do it? No, it's not easy to understand it, and it's not easy to put it into practice. So if we don't want, why to listen even, you know? That's why it comes here to this point where Shantideva is saying, okay, that's the point. First you must put it as your main priority to realize emptiness in this life. It's like people ask, what do you do in life? Oh, I am a lawyer, I am a doctor, I do this, I do that. No. When people ask, what do you do in life? The real answer should be, not that we need to say this, but we need to think. What do I do in my life? I generate love for myself, love for others, correct view of reality. That's my objective in life. Renunciation, bodhicitta, emptiness. That's my objective in life. What do I do for my livelihood? Oh, I am a doctor. I do business. I work in a shop, whatever. But what do I do in life? Oh, in life, I follow the path to enlightenment. What's my objective? Renunciation, love for myself, bodhicitta, love for others, correct view of reality, realization of emptiness. That's my objective in life. All the rest is secondary. Because, we will die. Sorry to say, but it will happen. And then when we die, we will be reborn again. And then we'll have another chance to get married, to find another job, to do all these things again and again and again and again and again. But if we do not change our mind, we will continue on the same stupid situations again and again. So that's why the main priority is what? Changing our mind, developing love towards ourselves and others, realizing the correct view of reality and emptiness. This is our main priority in life. Okay? And if we do it really, put our effort in this way, I'm sure there is no regret. Okay? It's really beneficial in this sense. All right. So with this, we finish for this year. And then next year, we can go on the pact of actually how to realize emptiness. Okay? Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Vagishwari Mum. Om Vagishwari Mum. Om Vagishwari Mum. Om Vagishwari Mum. Om Vajrapani Hum. Om Vajrapani Hum. Om Vajrapani Hum. Om Vajrapani Hum. Om Aritse Mam Soha. Om Aritse Mam Soha. Om Aritse Mam Soha. Om Aritse Mam Soha. Jetsun Lame Kutse Raptenchi Namkara Chinle Chochur Gepadan Losan Tempe Drume Sasumgi Nimo dele tsendele, nime kuyan delek shin. Nintsen taktu delek pe, koncho sumgi jingi lo. Sumgi ngodru so, koncho sumgi trashi sho. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.